Welcome, everyone. Very exciting. We are currently in our ongoing classes of the 7 universal Noahide commandments, the divine laws for all of mankind. And we are in the book, The Theory and Practice of Universal Ethics, the Noahide Laws, by Rabbi Dr. Shimon Dovid Cowen of Australia. We're in part 2, in the middle of chapter 9, section C, marriage, and that's top of page 228. So one of the prohibitions, one of the 7 commandments for all of mankind is what we call in Hebrew, in the Torah terminology, arayos, which means forbidden relations. And that includes many, many details. That's the prohibition against adultery and things related to that. So we're up to the part over here, C, after we discussed many, many details in the past few weeks in the earlier sections about forbidden sexual relations. And now we're going to discuss marriage within the world of the Noachites. So we're not talking over here to Jews or about Jews. We're speaking strictly to anybody who is not Jewish, to the non-Jewish world, which is, of course, the majority of the world. These are the God-given laws. Oftentimes, intention makes the whole world of a difference. What was the individual's intention? What were they thinking? So in certain cases, your intention may be almost irrelevant. For example, there's the poor, starving person at the street corner whose life is literally in danger, is about to expire. And you come by and you help that person. You give them water. You feed them. You clothe them. You saved their life. And you gave that person a job, etc. It doesn't matter what your intentions were, whether you're doing it for selfish reasons, whether you're a noble person, whether it's out of compassion, whether you want fame, it doesn't really matter. The fact is you saved his life. That's all that counts. Or the same thing for that matter, if someone is drowning and you saved their life, your intention doesn't really matter, as long as you did the good deed. Likewise, in the negative, if a person committed a crime, well, there we have a concept of unintentional or accidental. But as long as the person meant to do that which is forbidden, that's not good. However, there are certain areas where it all depends on what your intention is. And that's kind of what we're going to touch upon now as well. So what makes Noachites married? So we know that depending on the time and the place where you live in, there are laws of the land, and they determine how a couple, I should say, are married, and how they break that marriage, how they get divorced. Fine. But what is it, and how is it originally according to the Torah law for the Noachites? All right, so let's begin our lesson inside. Again, page 228 for those of you that have a copy and are following inside. C, marriage. The sexual relationship constitutive of marriage. The basic Noachide law of marriage is that a man and a woman are considered married such that adultery becomes a possible transgression Because remember, adultery is really only with a married woman. I mean, besides the other forbidden people like your maternal sister, but otherwise, in order for it to be adultery and not just, let's say, an act of prostitution, but for it to be adultery, the woman needs to be a married woman. So it's crucial to know whether she is, by Jewish law, or I should say by Torah law, is she married or not? So what makes the couple married so that there can be a possibility of the terrible transgression of adultery? Once the marriage has been consummated through normal sexual relations. That's it. That's what makes it. Moreover, this is so when sexual intercourse has taken place with a mutual intention that it should establish a marriage relationship, meaning they don't have to have a formal, fancy wedding, a party, people invited. They don't have to have anybody serving as the clergy or the legal judge or whomever is legally able to marry them. All they have to have is the two parties involved, the man and the woman, having relations with the intention of marriage from both their ends. He wants to marry her, and that's why he's having relations with her. She wants to be married to him, and that's why she is engaging in relations with him. And that makes them married. Thus, marriage is actual sexual cohabitation with the shared intent that it constitute marriage. That's all it takes. So, okay, let's finish the paragraph. The age at which marriage can take place is the matter of social determination of maturity and responsibility, i.e., of proper consent. And that changes from time to time, from country to country, or in the United States, from state to state. There is dispute as to whether marriage in a sexual union, which is forbidden, such as incest, is void or not. In other words, are they married? They did it, they had relations, and they both had intention to get married, but they weren't allowed to do that. So is she still married or not? And basically, we say that marriage is void. It doesn't really go into effect, according to most opinions. The issue here is not whether the marriage may continue, but whether, for example, were a man to have sexual relations with his maternal sister with the intention of marrying her, and she had intention to get married to him, as sick as that may sound. A marriage would have taken effect such that she would also have committed adultery were she now to have relations with another man, because she is in fact married, according to this, to her brother. So again, it's not Jewish law. It's not the way it is, I should say, for the Jewish people. But for the Noachites, if a man and a woman had relations for the sake, for the intention of marriage, even though they weren't allowed to do that, and even though it's a sin, but it could be that the marriage went into effect, meaning that now when some unrelated man has relations with this woman, he's actually committing adultery. They're committing adultery. As long as she's involved willingly, she's committing adultery. So let's say like this. Again, depending on the age. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that age 18 is considered an adult, where they can make their own decisions. They're not bound by what their parents say, etc., etc. And if they have consent, then whatever they do is binding and legal, etc. So let's say you have an 18-year-old teenager living at home and a dependent financially and otherwise, a dependent of the parents. And this person decides that they want to marry someone else. Let's just make up a scenario. the parents don't approve, or what have you. And this young man or young lady has marital relations in private with someone for the sake of marriage. They both intended it for the sake of marriage. The parents are unaware of it. The parents oppose it. They're married. Yeah, but we want to make a wedding. These are two adults, two consenting adults that engaged in this act for the sake of marriage. They're married. Okay? I'm not trying to give anybody any ideas out there, but we have to understand what makes a person legally, when I say legally, I mean by Jewish law, by Torah law, by Torah law, what makes them married? That they would now be considered husband and wife, and especially she is considered a married woman, and they would need to get divorced if they want to dissolve the marriage, etc. Mutual designation. Top of page 229. A term frequently encountered in connection with the Noahide concept of marriage is that husband and wife are mutually designated for one another. And again, it's very different, or it's different in Jewish law for Jews. So we're strictly speaking about for Noahites. Marriage signifies a stable, fixed commitment to one another, even though it is dissoluble. In other words, according to Hashem's law, you're not stuck with your married partner for life. It can be dissolved. The term mutually designated signifies a loyal sexual union of a man and a woman living together in one dwelling. It includes the notion that the designation has been made with the intention of a permanent, fixed, or settled union, not a temporary one. In other words, don't get any bright ideas and say, well, since it's inappropriate to have premarital sexual relations, it's not right. It may not be adultery, but whatever. I know it's not right. So therefore, no problem, boyfriend, girlfriend. Let's do it for the sake of marriage. And then let's get divorced in a month or something. No, it doesn't work like that. The idea is, it is the actual act of marital relations which makes them married. But the point is, it's with the intention that they're supposed to live together as husband and wife under the same roof. In addition, their status as a married couple must be known publicly, just as divorce is accompanied by some act which publicizes it. Okay, this Maimonides, as he references in the footnote, the Rambam says that. So really, to just in private have relations for the sake of marriage and not tell anybody, that's technically maybe they married, but there's a problem there. Because again, by the Noahide law, no rings are necessary, no chuppah canopy is necessary, no festivity is necessary, no blessings are necessary, no clergy is necessary. However, publicity is necessary. That's the way the Rambam puts it. That everybody knows that this couple is living together as husband and wife. That makes them married. And the same thing when it comes to divorce. When either one of them decides that they do not want to remain married, so when one of them moves out with the intention of divorce, of ending the marriage, and then that becomes public knowledge, the marriage is ended. No document, no bill of divorce is necessary. No payment is necessary, etc. Strengthening marriage. simply designating one another as stable sexual partners living together in the same house as something publicly known is the baseline concept of marriage. In today's world, in today's society, you may find many people that for whatever reason, they don't want to make the commitment of marriage. They're afraid of getting married, or there may be some financial benefits to not being married. Whatever the reasons and the calculations are, if they're living together, and it's known that they're living together as husband and wife, that makes them married. Especially they're having children together. So you have a family, and for whatever reason, they don't want to get married, but they already have 5 children. That's called being married. So you don't need to have any certificate or a marriage license or whatever. I'm not saying that's the ideal way to do it in today's society, because the law of the land does play a role, but I don't even think it's illegal. I don't think there's anything illegal. I don't know the law, but I don't think there's anything illegal about 2 people living together and having children out of wedlock, as it would be called legally. I don't think there's anything illegal about that. And then if and when they get divorced, they don't have to get divorced. Yet, second view in Noahide law distinguishes this from a relationship in which the wife has additionally, from the outset, been given a financial commitment. According to this view, the status of the woman in the former situation is that of concubine, and in the latter, a wife. So that's really the whole difference. There is a concept in Torah which is called pilagesh, in English translated as concubine. That's basically a wife that one is not married to, which kind of an oxymoron. So it's a wife that the husband doesn't have all the same obligations towards her as he does towards his wife or wives in the case of polygamy. So according to some opinions, that would be called today a concubine. That's the whole difference between that and a wife. If he doesn't have a financial commitment towards her, see, normally the husband is responsible to be the breadwinner and clothe her and feed her, etc. So if he didn't take on those responsibilities and she didn't demand it, so there's a mutual understanding, we're going to live together as husband and wife, but no obligations. Again, doesn't mean that she's not a married woman. According to this opinion, she's not really a wife, but it's a concubine. Sarah was a wife to Abraham. When Abraham took Hagar, back again after the passing of Sarah, it was as a concubine. See, if you remember, Abraham and Sarah had a slave servant, maidservant, Hagar. And after they were married, Abraham and Sarah, for a period of 10 years or more, and they had no children. So Sarah gave Abraham a suggestion that he was extremely reluctant about until Hashem himself told him, listen to what Sarah's telling you and follow her instructions. She had the idea that Abraham, should marry Hagar, the maidservant. And as Sarah put it this way, I will be built up through her, because since she is our property, and hopefully she will bear children, they're considered like my children because we own her. So it was her idea. Now, as the story goes, which presumably you're familiar with, it's right there in the Chumash, in the written Torah. Not going to go through all the details, but she gave birth to a son. And Sarah had them expelled from the house and was sent off, and that's it. Goodbye. She left with her son. Dramatic story. And then, of course, this is after Sarah was blessed with her own child, Yitzchak, Isaac, the father of the Jewish nation, father of Jacob and Esau. Years later, Sarah passed away. According to some, Yitzchak was 37 years old, which means that Ishmael was about 50 years old. That's right. And or maybe even older. Anyhow, Sarah passed away. Then the verse says that after Sarah passed away, Avraham married a woman named Keturah. According to some of the commentaries, such as the primary commentary, Rashi, that is another name for Hagar. He remarried Hagar. He took her as a wife now. The biblical term for a concubine is pilegesh. And the term has in it the etymological root peleg, which means half. She is half a wife, designated for a primarily sexual relationship, not for the building of a family with the bearing of children, who eventually inherits their father and who herself receives a financial commitment from her husband from the outset. Of course, she may conceive and she may have children, but that's not the intention. And again, as I said in the past few weeks, much of what we're learning now is so difficult for many of us to wrap our minds around because we're so conditioned with the Western world, with society, with what we're living in now. So certain things seem so inappropriate, even though today's world is really crazy in this regard. But yet there's certain things where we feel, oh, that's so inappropriate. Like what? The Torah discusses and allows for a side wife? Like, what's that all about? So, again, this is the way it is. Again, we're not saying that it should be done. We're not encouraging people to do it, surely not today. But we need to know the law. How was it originally? Just like polygamy was 100% legal 1,000 years ago for Jews. And today, again, we've discussed this before, and I don't want to get into it now, but putting aside the law of the land, for Noachites, as long as they're properly married, a man is allowed to have more than one wife at a time. A woman can't have more than one husband at a time. A man can have more than one wife. Polygamy, that's legal by Torah law. Likewise, there's a concept for Jews and non-Jews alike of pilegesh, of a concubine. And again, it's very difficult to understand it. I don't want to misrepresent it. But basically, the wife is the person that you have not only physical relations with, but this is your partner. And of course, it gets a little more complicated if you're saying that you have more than one wife at the same time. This is your partner. With this woman or women, you're building your home. The main objective of marriage, it's fair to say, is to bear children. Those children will inherit, they will continue, they will be the legacy, etc. and to build a proper, harmonious, peaceful home, which is going to be healthy on all accounts and strengthen the world and bring morality to the world. Family life, proper family. Okay. That's the intention of marriage, basically. Maybe I've oversimplified it, but you get the idea. Now, prostitution, no, that's not allowed. It's not appropriate. But what a man originally, again, we don't do this, but according to Torah law, a man would be permitted to designate a particular woman, not as his wife, but as his partner for relations. That's really her only purpose there. Of course, she's allowed to be a maidservant, she's allowed to do chores, but she's not considered another wife. But look at me, the man has 2, 3, 4 wives, and they should all be treated with respect, and he owes all of them financial, etc. This concubine is a different story. And again, it's public knowledge that he has a concubine. It's not, I don't want to use the word mistress, because I think mistress, I don't know if it's adultery, because if she's not married, it's not really adultery, but mistress is not good in today's American terminology. I don't know what it is in England, but the way it's used today, a mistress is not proper. As far as I know, I don't know, maybe I didn't see enough movies or read enough novels, but as far as I know, a mistress, again, today's world is very sick and disgusted and corrupt. I get that. But I think that a mistress is usually not with the full consent and approval of the wife. And it's not public knowledge. So I don't want to use the word mistress. I'm using the English word concubine. And that means that it's a woman that he's not married to, but she's like half a wife. Okay. And now we're going to kind of explain it. This is the way it's a translation of the Ramban, Nachmanides, on his commentary on the Chumash, on the Bible. In the words of one major commentator, this is the Ramban, not to be confused with Maimonides. He lived a bit later, and this is known as Nachmanides. And we quote, "It is possible that people, when they married according to Noahide law, through entering a sexual relationship, would write a marriage contract together with gifts. And for those whom they wished to retain as a concubine, and would send away when they wanted, and whose sons would not be amongst his heirs, they would not write any financial commitment." Very simple. That's how because otherwise it really does get a little bit difficult to understand what exactly legally is a concubine. That's how he puts it. So in other words, biologically, if she bore children from this man, if she conceived and have children, those children are biologically his, they're not his heirs. They don't get a portion. They don't get a lot in his estate. So for practical purposes, they're not his children. Now again, emotions get involved over here. So it's very hard. You think, what? There's children, and these are his half siblings, and do they get along? And does he love them? All of that is a beautiful, wonderful discussion. That's not what we're talking about. That's pretty much all emotion. Speaking very strictly, cold, dry, black and white legalities. Legally, they're not his children. They're biologically his children. And he could send her away without owing her anything. He didn't marry her by giving her any money, and he's not. Why she would agree? Whatever. Your imagination. Make up why she would want this, why she would agree. It's not by force. A relationship in which a man and a woman live together, but commit to no more than enduring sexual loyalty without financial commitments from the outset, is thus not optimal marriage by Noahide standards. She would basically be this concubine, Pilegesh, half-wife. There are further sources for the notion that a man is obligated to provide for his wife, and that the wife has various duties towards her husband, and that the marriage document must refer to financial matters. Okay, now not everybody agrees with all this, but again, he brings down in the footnote various sources, and this is how Rabbi Cowen is presenting it. I'm not disagreeing with him, but you just have to understand that it's not necessarily exactly as he's saying it. But definitive here for the second view is the financial bond during and after the life of the marriage. That's really a proper marriage, and that's what makes them husband and wife, or that's part of being properly married as husband and wife. An intended, permanent, and publicly acknowledged sexual cohabitation, even without the voluntary commitment to formal financial responsibility during and after the marriage, is marriage, such as to make adultery possible. Meaning, she's a married woman, and if anybody has relations with her other than this man, they have committed adultery. The man and this woman, if it was done with her will. It does not, however, constitute the fullest Noachide marriage. It's not ideal. So she's married, but this fullest sense of marriage exists either where a couple has formally and actively registered the marriage in some sense, with statements of sexual loyalty and financial responsibility. It is questionable whether state legislation, which imposes financial responsibilities and commitments for men and women who happen to cohabit with a sexual union, converts a de facto relationship into basic Noachide marriage. So he's not making that clear. It's not clear whether just because legally that's considered that they're married, not necessarily doesn't make it. It would seem that the intention of the parties to enter a steady and enduring union is requisite for this to equate the basic concept of marriage. Moreover, contemporary society itself continues to distinguish de facto relationships from marriage. So they don't even say that it's an absolute marriage. Clearly, it is preferable that individuals actively solemnize and register their marital relationship with formal financial commitments as a conscious undertaking of a union to achieve and impress upon the world in their own microcosm of the divine value of harmony and unity, which we mentioned. But that's the idea of building this edifice, this family, this union. It's got a big picture, how it affects the world. When the solemnization, moreover, explicitly invokes Hashem, this increases both the fixity and the sanctity of marriage. Top of page 232, the termination of marriage. Death of a spouse terminates marriage. Once one of them dies, they're no longer married. So also does divorce. According to Noachide law, divorce can be initiated either by the husband or the wife. They're equal. It is established by a parting or a sending from the house. Bye-bye. But this does not mean that a temporary abandonment of one spouse by the other constitute divorce. In other words, say, it wasn't adultery because we were having a disagreement and our therapist said that we need a little bit of a break from each other and therefore he or she moved out for a little bit. No, they're still married and therefore it could very well still be considered adultery if she has relations with someone else. It has to be an act taken with the same seriousness of intent as marriage, and so also be publicly known. So it's basically the exact opposite of marriage. So just like they got together and they moved in together, and it became public that they're living together as husband and wife for the sake of being married to each other, so too the breakup is supposed to be. It doesn't mean you have to make a big party, doesn't mean that they have to tell all their friends and put it in, but it has to be that it's known that they're not just going through some time now where they're separated. It has to be known. So whether you use the extreme or a very intense word, divorce, but that's the idea. All right, at this point, let's take questions, comments, or anything of that nature. Anybody?
Okay,
Nope.
so this is Aaron. So a concubine, I'm making sure I understand this, is someone that's a half wife. However,
That's the well, that's the wording that we use. Go ahead.
All right, and someone who's designated for just sexual relationships is not a wife, but is a concubine as well.
That's a concubine.
So,
and there she is considered married enough to this man that if she has relations with anybody else, that's adulterous.
Okay, that simplifies it real cool. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Which I guess, I'm not 100% certain, but I guess in today's society, when you have boyfriend and girlfriend moving in together, and they want to be loyal to each other, arguably, we could say that's a concubine. They're clearly not getting married, and they don't want people to refer to them as married in any way, shape, or form. Some of them may call it my partner, some may even not want to say my partner, but they're together. Now, of course, it depends also, what about the financial situation? Are they also completely, they're living together. Who pays the groceries? Do they have one account? Who's making the money? Who's the breadwinner, etc.? But it's possible, depending on the situation, that would actually be a concubine relationship, even though that's not their intention. Well, what is it? Their intention is to be together, and they want to be loyal to each other. However they explain it, some might say, well, we're not sure we want to get married, so we just want to try it out for the first 20 years, and then we'll decide. Others might say, we definitely don't want to ever get married to each other. So whatever they say, but the fact is they're together, not just boyfriend, girlfriend, it's beyond that. But they, under no circumstances, right now, want to call it marriage. So that might really be this Pelegish situation, this concubine.
And that's okay?
It's not ideal. It should not be done, but it's not as bad as it may sound. Meaning, as we said, the whole point of marriage is, of course, to bring children and to make it a proper, healthy family structure with morals, etc., etc. Well, that's not morally correct. Let's assume they have children. The children are growing up. This is mom, this is dad, but mom and dad are not married to each other. That's not right. For Noachites, I'm not talking about for Jews. For Noachites, that's not right. That's not proper. But it's not necessarily a sin. Yes, it's marriage out of wedlock, but as we said, what do you mean? They're half married. So my answer is there's two sides to it. On the one hand, it's inappropriate, it's not right, it's not good, it's not the way it should be done. Get married. Or separate. However, having said that, it may not be actual sinful, or may not be as bad as it sounds.
Okay, James, I'm sorry. I just wanted to get this last part of this in here. All right, so that being the case, how am I going to say this? The people who are doing 50-50 today, they're saying, okay, we're going to move together, we're going to do 50-50 in relationships as far as financial. I'll pay my half, you pay your half, and then we'll have sexual relations. Is that the same thing?
Have they made a commitment of loyalty to each other?
Not necessarily. They're just doing 50-50 living together, and they cohabitating sexually.
And let's say from the woman's perspective, from the female,
she's in line with it.
I'm saying, but let's say she has a relation with other men. Like, does her partner have a right to I don't know, to want to kill her and to consider that she's adulterous and she broke their 50-50? I mean, what's the deal?
I don't know. I don't know how that's working with everybody these days. I'm hearing a lot about this 50-50 stuff. I don't know how they arrange the sexual stuff, but I do know that they go into this, but they may, I see it would be kind of difficult to say they're not going to go out and do adultery.
Right, so that's the problem. As long as they don't have this commitment, then it's not even a concubine. Then it's not proper. I mean, in any case, it's not proper. They should get married, and in essence, it is marriage. We said they don't need to have a marriage license or certificate. They're married, so they should just call it that. She doesn't have to actually change her last name, but they should consider it and tell people that they're married. This is not my 50-50 guy. She's not my 50-50 woman. This is my husband. This is my wife. That's how it should be.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
James.
James?
Hi, Rabbi Turin. Thank you. And thanks for the questions, Aaron. Well, I researched this years and years ago when I was dating my wife, Danielle, because I wanted to know about marriage and relationships. And it came to this, like the whole Pelagish thing. And of course, when it comes to nomenclature and language, you have hangups when it says concubine because it sounds like concubine. But it's really like you said, Pelagish, a half wife, a half woman. And one of the things that that stuck out with me was when you are alone with the opposite sex, when you're alone with a woman, that is and I'm just talking about just being alone, like even behind like a closed door, that constitutes potentiality. And correct me if I'm wrong, of being a Pelagish in a Pelagish relationship, and so you have suspicion there. And like, for instance, when a woman, she is showing for 3 months and things of this nature. So in other words, my point is it helps when it comes to dealings with modesty and not being alone with another woman, or a woman being alone with a man and things like that. So because there is issues in our today's society, like, well, marriage, and well, then that brings up the concept of marriage. What is marriage? In a predominantly Christian nation, like, well, what was marriage to begin with? And when you study it further within Torah, it actually is something deeper than what we were raised with the concept of. And then jumping back into Pelagish relationship, it gets kind of like you on the right track of when it comes to relationships, particularly in modesty and being alone with the opposite sex and what that actually implies, things like that.
Okay, so if I understood you correctly, a couple of things. One, the danger of saying that if someone is in seclusion with the opposite gender, that in some form that can make her a Pelagish, then that means that unfortunately you've now opened the door for adultery, because if she's this guy's Pelagish, just because they spend time alone, now anyone else who's going to have relations with her is not just having relations with someone that's not his wife, but it's actually a married woman. And we don't want it to be like that. That's very harsh. That's If that's the truth, that's the truth. But it seems like it's too harsh, too severe. Now, as far as not being alone, those are, for the Jewish people, rabbinic decrees which came along throughout the generations. They didn't make all the rules all at once. It came in stages. And I don't think that it applies to Bnei Noach, but of course, like many things, and this would surely be an area where if you want to be more pious, more righteous, and more refined, etc., so copy what the Jew has to do in this area. Meaning, everybody agrees. I'm going to speak about for Jewish law for the Jews for a moment. Everybody agrees that a Jewish man, is not allowed to have sexual relations with any woman that's not his wife. It may not be adultery. It may not be a capital offense. In most cases, well, okay. But it's not allowed, that's for sure. Not allowed if it's not his wife. Now, there is a machloikes, there is a dispute amongst the codifiers, amongst the commentators, as to whether physical contact in an affectionate way, in an intimate way, but not actually having relations, just, let's say, hugging and kissing, whether that is biblically forbidden or rabbinically forbidden. Everybody agrees it's forbidden for Jews. If it's not your wife, it's not allowed. Question is it biblically forbidden or is it rabbinically forbidden? That's a dispute. And then the next part, which everybody agrees is biblically forbidden, is the idea that you were referring to, James, of seclusion, being alone with someone, that because we're afraid that it might lead to actual sin, to actual having relations. And they instituted it in stages. So first it was a person can't be alone with any of the arayos, any woman that he's not allowed to marry. Then they also added a non-Jews, and they added even if she's not married. So there's stages in there. I don't think that for Bnei Noach, for Noachites, that applies. But again, because there's a logical reason for why these decrees were made. It's a safeguard. It's protection. As a matter of fact, without getting into it, but the reason why it was made, was done, was because of an incident that actually happened. It's in Tanakh. I don't want to get into whose children it was, but basically, and you may know what I'm referring to, there was an incident, and therefore the great, great Rabbi, the king of the generation, he and his courts instituted this prohibition. So it makes sense, even though biblically it wasn't always forbidden. So for Noachites, to say that if you're going to be in seclusion with a woman, that therefore that makes it considered as if you had relations, and therefore she's a Pelegish, I don't think is true. Because even amongst Jews, it's not true. It has to be that they're alone with the intention of marriage. And at least theoretically, they're able to consummate the marriage. And that's why in a Jewish wedding, for example, after the ceremony, after the chuppah, when he gives her the ring and they're married, part of the ceremony is that they need to spend a certain amount of time. And there's a whole discussion with Talmud, how much time that is. How many minutes is it? But they have to spend a certain amount of time all alone in a room that's locked in seclusion. And the idea is it has to be enough time, minimal time, for them to be able to consummate the marriage. So I don't think that we're going to say that Noachites, that if someone's alone with someone else, that makes her even a concubine or anything like that.
James McCumas.
Go ahead, James. Chicago to Springfield.
James, I think you need to unmute your mic.
Are you muted? Hello, hello.
I'm sorry, you guys. I've been dropping my phone too much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. It's yes, I've dropped it a lot, so forgive me. But thank you. Rabbi, this is such a timely topic on my mind because I've been thinking about this. Could I ask this? Abraham bringing Hagar and Ishmael back. Is there any animosity that drives the current state of affairs in Gaza, so to speak? Or is this an avenue of approach and reconciliation? Your comments? With the reconciliation that Hagar and Ishmael were brought back into the fold, even though it wasn't complete, is that an avenue of approach, to for reconciliation? Or is that just, or is that just pie in the sky?
Or what?
Or just pie in the sky, not an avenue for reconciliation.
Yeah, I don't think the reconciliation is that everybody has to recognize and accept the truth of Hashem, of the Torah, and what everybody's function is here in making this world godly, that Hashem chose a certain piece of land and he gave it to Abraham exclusively for his son Isaac, Yitzchak, exclusively for his son Jacob, and for his descendants. And the rest of the world has their share in the world and needs to make this a proper world. But the chosen people have the promised land, and they have to realize that, and they should actually be willingly, not through warfare, be giving it to the Jewish people, and not only the land of the 7 nations, but also the additional 3, because if you look into the book of Genesis, by the Bris Ben Absarim, by the covenant, so there are actually 10 nations listed there by name. And 3 of them we haven't received yet. Those are on the eastern, it's not Azda, it's the other side, it's the eastern side of the Jordan. But all of that, now is the time that it's supposed to be given to us. And there's many, many, many theories or ways of explaining it. Like one way would be that the Jewish people are supposed to have Gaza and beyond, and because we didn't hold on to it or didn't take it, so we're being forced into this terrible, terrible war, and Hashem is going to navigate things that the Jewish people, so to say, won't have a choice but to do the right thing and to take over the land. But no one other than the Jewish people belong as a permanent state. I'm not getting into Ger Toisho, but as a permanent residence in the Holy Land of the Promised Land of Israel. It's exclusively for the Jewish people, and we need to have the Holy Temple built on the Temple Mount in Yerushalayim, and that all 12 tribes are living in the land of Eretz Yisrael in the expanded borders of the 10 nations. And then the non-Jewish people, they come to the Beis HaMikdash on a regular basis, as the verse says. We know the various different prophecies. So that would say.
Thank you, class. James.
Okay, we are.
Bob. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, next week, as I mentioned, at least I mentioned it in private to Bob. I may have said it, but I'm gonna say it again. Next week, we're gonna start a little bit late. A few minutes. I'm gonna try, but I anticipate being about 10 minutes late, give or take. So that's for next week. So if you're here on time, just be patient. And we're up to page 232. Procreation and parenthood, very, very important. Some people are, perhaps already older, but it's very important for us to know. Very, very important, even though people can say, well, it's not one of the 7 Noahide commandments of be fruitful and multiply. That may be true, but as we've discussed, and we're going to get into it, the importance of having children, etc. All right. All the best, everyone.
Riv Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, class.